The wind swept gently through the trees of Oakwood Cemetery, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and brittle leaves. Autumn had painted the landscape in hues of burnished gold, deep rust, and dying crimson. A carpet of fallen foliage blanketed the gravel paths and clustered around the cold marble graves like forgotten prayers. The sun hung low, casting long shadows between the headstones, and somewhere in the distance, a lone bird called a soft, melancholic trill that faded into silence. Matthew Langston stepped through the cemetery gates with the quiet precision of a man rehearsing a ritual. His overcoat, a tailored charcoal blend of cashmere and silk, shifted with each purposeful stride. Italian leather shoes, polished to an obsessive shine, crunched faintly beneath him. He walked as if the weight of the world pressed gently on his shoulders, just enough to slow him, not enough to stop him. In the outside world, Matthew Langston was a name whispered in boardrooms and written in headlines. The founder and CEO of Arcusys Technologies, valued at over $30 billion. He was a man who turned algorithms into empires. But here, beneath the towering maples of Oakwood, he was something else, something smaller. He stopped before a headstone symbol, unadorned, carved from white marble. The lettering was clean, as if freshly etched, though he paid handsomely to have it cleaned every month. Ava Grace Langston, beloved daughter, the 0012015, you are my starlight. He knelt, slowly, carefully, as if afraid the ground might shatter beneath him. A bouquet of white lilies rested in his gloved hand, her favorite. He placed them gently at the base of the stone, adjusting the stems until they sat perfectly aligned. Then, with bare fingers trembling against the cold, he reached forward and traced her name with the tips of his fingers. "Hello, sweetheart," he murmured. His voice, always firm and clipped in boardrooms, trembled in the softness. "Dad's here." The silence after his words was so complete it rang in his ears. For a moment, it felt like the whole world had paused, listening. He closed his eyes, exhaled, and rested one palm flat against the headstone. A slight shiver passed through him, not from the chill, but from memory. 10 years. 10 years since the accident, since the phone call that broke the world in two. The images still haunted him, the twisted metal, the flashing lights, the sterile beeping of hospital machines, and Ava's small hand still warm, impossibly warm for just a little while. He hadn't been there when it happened. A meeting in Zurich, a delay at the airport. He arrived just after the machines went silent. Since then, Matthew had built towers of innovation, conquered markets, and bought silence where comfort failed. Yet, in all the deals and acquisitions, he had never once negotiated his way out of the void inside. He came here every month, same day, same time, same flowers, same words. Control was all he had left. Even over grief, a breeze stirred the leaves at his feet. He glanced up briefly, eyes narrowing as something rustled near the old oak tree in the far corner of the cemetery. A flicker of movement, shadows, perhaps, a squirrel, maybe nothing. He dismissed it with a breath, returning his focus to the grave. "Do you still remember me?" he whispered, voice cracking. "I talk to you, but sometimes I wonder if I even sound like your dad anymore." The wind didn't answer. It never did. But this time, this visit, he would not leave alone. Something was watching, waiting. And for the first time in 10 years, the ritual of grief would not end the way he expected. The sun was lower now, balancing delicately on the edge of the horizon like a glowing coin about to drop from the sky. Oakwood Cemetery had begun to change with the shifting light, the golden beauty of autumn giving way to something more somber. Long shadows spilled between the rows of headstones, stretching like fingers across the cold ground. Matthew Langston remained kneeling in silence, but something unsettled him now. Not just memory, not grief, something else. He rose slowly, brushing specks of dirt from his slacks, and turned toward the whispering rustle he had heard earlier. He narrowed his eyes toward the old, overgrown section of the cemetery, where the plots were older, the graves forgotten, their inscriptions faded by time and weather. It wasn't part of his usual path. He'd always stayed within the curated section, neat, clean, where the grass was trimmed like a golf course and the tombstones gleamed like museum pieces. But today, something felt different. At first, he thought it was his imagination, but then he saw it, a faint flicker of movement behind a large, cracked gravestone. He took a cautious step forward. Another dot, and then he saw them. For small figures crouched behind the monument, still as statues at first, as if holding their breath. Children. They were girls, young, maybe 8 or 9. dressed in layers of clothes that didn't match and clearly didn't fit. One wore a woolen coat 3 sizes too big. Another had a scarf that trailed like a tail behind her. Their shoes were mismatched, and their eyes, wide and uncertain, stared back at him like deer caught in headlights. They weren't playing. They were hiding. And one of them, the girl with the threadbare pink beanie, was clutching something. In her hand, a paper bag. Inside it, Matthew saw the corner of a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. She clutched it like treasure. He said nothing for a moment, uncertain what he was even seeing. Then the girl in the oversized coat stood. Not defiantly, not timidly either. She was the leader. You could see it in the way she moved. Even in her silence, her chin was tilted slightly upward. Her eyes didn't waver. "We're not bothering anyone," she said, her voice surprisingly clear. Matthew's brow furrowed. "You're not. I just..." He stopped. What could he possibly say? Why offer little girls hiding in a cemetery? The girl looked down at the paper bag, then at the gravestone behind her. He read the inscription over her shoulder. Angela Marie Taylor, 1985 to 0-5. Mother, brave until the end. Fresh flowers lay on the grave, not from a florist, picked by hand. Dandelions, weeds, a wild bouquet made by children who had no other option. Matthew swallowed. "Is this your mother's grave?" he asked gently. All 4 girls nodded at once, silent, synchronized. He studied them. Identical. Quadruplets? No, not quite. Close enough to be twins 4 times over. But each had something unique. One's eyes sparkled with defiance. Another's posture bent slightly as if carrying the other's weight. One had scuffed hands, dirty from digging or drawing or both. The last never took her eyes off Matthew. Quiet, piercing. "Hi, Matthew," he said finally. "We don't talk to strangers." The bold one replied. "I'm not asking you to," he said. "Just making sure you're all right." There was silence, only the sound of a leaf scraping across stone. Then the quietest girl, the one who hadn't looked away, spoke in a voice soft as ash. "She died here, right here. We come every night so she won't be alone." Matthew's throat tightened. "You sleep here?" he asked, the words barely audible. She nodded. Another girl added, "Foster home said they'd split us. We made a promise, no matter what. We stayed together, always." The one in the coat glanced down again. "We didn't ask for help. We're okay. Just don't tell anyone." Matthew took a slow step forward and crouched beside the grave. He wasn't sure why. Maybe to level with them, maybe to feel what they felt. The headstone was newer, not polished like Eva's, but clean, cared for, with love, not money. "What would your mother say if she saw you sleeping here like this?" he asked, not expecting an answer, but he got one. She'd say, the smallest girl whispered, that we found our way to her, that we're still brave. Her voice cracked halfway through, and something inside Matthew Langston, something frozen for a decade, cracked too. He said nothing. He couldn't. His voice had gone somewhere unreachable. Instead, he stood slowly, looking down at the grave, and then at the girls. They didn't ask for anything. Not food, not shelter, not even pity. They had no idea who he was. But he was beginning to wonder if they had come not for help, but to help him. And deep in his chest, a thought began to bloom like a storm cloud. Why today? Why these girls? Why this grave? Because fate, it seemed, didn't knock. It whispered. And sometimes it whispered in the voices of little girls in a cemetery at dusk. Rain began to fall. Not a storm, not yet. Just a steady whisper, cold, persistent droplets tapping against marble and fabric and flesh, soaking through the brittle leaves scattered across the cemetery grounds. The girls didn't flinch. They remained where they were, huddled near the grave as though it offered shelter from something greater than the weather, something ancient, something that lived in the silence between heartbeats. Matthew stood motionless, rain slipping down the collar of his coat, pulling on his shoulders, beating off the fine wool. He should have walked away. He should have turned and gone back to the world he understood, a world of profit margins, quarterly reports, and boardroom loyalty bought with gold and stock options. But he couldn't move. The youngest girl sneezed. A small, pitiful sound quickly muffled by her sister's scarf. Matthew took a step forward. The boldest girl tensed, instinctively stepping between him and the others, protector, leader. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said gently. "We don't need anything," she replied, chin lifted defiantly. "We're not begging." Didn't say you were. We're not looking for someone to save us. He paused. Maybe I'm not looking to save anyone. For a long moment, they stared at one another. The quiet war between pride and compassion hung thick in the cold air. Then his voice softened even further. Look, I know what it's like to lose someone and feel like the world just forgets. Like you've got to carry it all on your own, but you don't have to sleep in the rain. The girl's jaw twitched. Her hands clenched and unclenched. At her sides, we made a promise, one of the other girls said suddenly, the second tallest, with a soft drawl. We stayed together, no matter what, even if it means hiding, even if it means here. A gust of wind blew through the cemetery and the rain picked up. The trees moaned. The girls stood close, forming a tight square around each other. It was instinctual, primal. They weren't just surviving together. They were each other's survival. Matthew knelt again, not at the grave this time, at their level. Let me help. Just one warm meal. That's all I'm offering. No one's splitting you up. No one's taking you anywhere you don't want to go. The protector, Lena, though he wouldn't learn her name until later, hesitated. Then Mira, the quietest of the four, reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It had been folded and unfolded so many times it was soft like fabric. She handed it to Matthew without a word. He opened it. It was a letter, handwritten. The ink had run in places. The loops and curves of the pen trembled with exhaustion. But it was unmistakably a mother's hand. To whoever finds my daughters, Matthew's heart stuttered. If you are reading this, I didn't make it. I've told them to stay together no matter what. They are bright, brave, and stronger than I ever was. Please, don't see them as a burden. See them for who they are, because if you do, they'll change your life, just like they did mine. It was signed simply, Angela. Matthew's knees went weak, and he slowly sat back on the damp ground. The rain-forgotten Angela, the name carved into the gravestone. The woman buried here, but the name sparked something else in him, an echo from 10 years ago. A hospital hallway, a nurse with tired eyes and a soft voice, always humming when she thought no one was listening, always staying late. Eva liked her. A nurse named Angela. Could it be? He looked up at the girls. They watched him, not with fear anymore, but something else, something closer to recognition. What was your mother's last name? He asked, barely breathing. Taylor. Lena said. Angela Taylor, the nurse, Eva's nurse. He remembered her now. The only person who stayed past visiting ours when he was stuck in Tokyo. The one who held Eva's hand when Matthew couldn't. The one who promised her, as she drifted into morphine dreams, that someone would stay. Angela had stayed, and now, 10 years later, it was her daughters, her four daughters, kneeling at her grave, whispering the same promise to her that she once whispered to Eva. The realization hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't chance. This wasn't coincidence. This was something deeper, a circle closing, a thread stitched through time and grief, looping backward and forward again. He stood slowly, trembling, and looked at the girls. You don't know this, he said, his voice tight, but your mother once saved my daughter's life. Not by medicine, not physically. She just stayed, when no one else did. She held my daughter's hand when I couldn't get there in time. None of the girls spoke, but something shifted. The rain softened. The trees seemed to lean in. Matthew looked at them, all of them, and felt something unravel inside him. 10 years of guilt, of cold penthouses and empty offices, of avoiding anything that smelled like vulnerability. I think it's time I return the favor, he whispered. He turned slowly toward the gate, then paused and glanced back. You coming? For a moment, no one moved. Then the girls picked up their bag, their wild bouquet, and their memories, and followed him into the darkening evening. Not rescued, not saved. Seen. And somewhere, deep in the spaces between loss and healing, the wind carried a whisper that neither man nor child could hear, but it was there, all the same. The car ride was silent at first. Matthew Langston's black Tesla cut through the wet streets like a shadow, its headlights catching the gleam of rain on pavement, passing shuttered stores and empty bus stops like ghosts in a dream. The city felt colder tonight, not just in temperature, in spirit. It was the kind of cold that came from being unseen, from sleeping in alleys while the world kept moving. The girls sat in the back, for small bodies pressed together in one wide seat, their breaths fogging the windows. They didn't speak, not even to each other, not out of fear, out of habit. Silence was their armor, their secret code, and it had protected them this far. Matthew adjusted the heat and reached into the glove compartment. Pulling out a sealed protein bar, he handed it back wordlessly. One of the girls, June, the second quietest, took it, broke it into 4 pieces, and handed them out with surgical precision. Matthew watched them in the mirror. Notice how they didn't fight over crumbs, how their eyes scanned the world, like they were always expecting it to shift beneath their feet, how they didn't ask where he was taking them. He wasn't sure if that terrified him or humbled him. The car turned onto a private drive and crept up toward a sleek, modern house built almost entirely of glass and steel. Motion sensor lights illuminated the stone pathway as they approached the house, glowing white against the night like a spaceship landed in the middle of a forested cliffside. Inside, floor-to-ceiling windows framed distant city lights like a living painting. The girls climbed out slowly, cautious. Their worn shoes tapped lightly against the stone steps as Matthew opened the front door with his fingerprint. They hesitated at the threshold. "It's okay," he said. "You're not trespassing. You're invited." Still, they lingered. The oldest girl, Lena, standing just slightly ahead of the others, her eyes scanned everything, as if trying to detect the catch. There was always a catch. Matthew crouched down beside her. "You don't have to stay long," he said, "just until the rain stops, just until we figure things out." Lena didn't nod, didn't speak, but she stepped inside. The others followed. Inside, the house smelled of cedar wood and silence, not warmth, not home. It was filled with expensive emptiness, art that was beautiful but cold, furniture that was designed for aesthetics, not comfort. One of the girls touched a glass sculpture shaped like a frozen flame. Another stared at the digital fireplace that flickered soundlessly beneath a mounted screen. "I'll make something warm," Matthew said, heading to the kitchen. "Soup, tea," June murmured. "Tea sounds like a dream." The moment she said it, the tension cracked. Mira smiled. Nina giggled softly, and for a second, the house didn't feel so empty. Matthew set water to boil and opened a cabinet full of mismatched mugs, the only personal thing in his kitchen. Eva had collected them, one from every city they traveled to. She had insisted each one have a story. He picked the one from Kyoto, Eva's favorite. He almost set it down, but then handed it to Lena. Her eyes widened just slightly, like she understood the quiet significance. As the tea steeped, the girls sat on the giant sectional, still clinging to their bags. Their silence wasn't distrust anymore. It was fatigue, emotional weight heavy as wet wool. Matthew saw it, and something inside him rebelled against it. He wasn't sure if it was guilt, fate, or something more spiritual, but these girls had not landed in his life by accident. He brought over the tea, placed the mugs in front of them, and sat across from them with his own. "Tell me about your mom," he said. For a while, no one answered. Then Nina, the youngest by a few minutes, spoke quietly. She liked rainy days, said they made the world honest. June added, she sang while doing dishes, off-key, always made up her own words. Mira smiled. She had this thing where she'd tap your forehead and say, "You got stars in there, baby, use them." Matthew swallowed. Lena didn't speak. Her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with something stronger, resolve. "I remember her humming," Matthew said softly. She was Ava's nurse. She was always humming when she thought no one noticed. Lena's eyes locked on his. "You knew her." "I didn't thank her," he said. "Not the way I should have." Lena leaned forward. "She never asked for thanks," she said. "People like you don't remember people like her." The words hung in the air like a slap, and Matthew, powerful, calculating, composed, had no defense. "You're right," he whispered. "I didn't remember until tonight, and now I can't forget." Silence returned, but this time it was full. It pulsed. It meant something. That Mira asked the question, "Why are you really helping us?" Matthew blinked. "Because I owe." "Your mother?" "No," Mira said, shaking her head. "You helped us before you knew who she was." "Why?" He couldn't answer. Not really, because he didn't know. Because when he saw them in that graveyard, something ancient inside him had stirred. Something beyond debt or duty. Something like recognition, and before he could speak, June whispered something that made him go still. "She told us you'd find us." All four girls looked up now. Matthew's blood turned cold. "What did you say?" "She wrote it," June said, opening her bag again. She pulled out another letter, folded carefully, protected in a worn envelope. Matthew took it with shaking hands. The writing on the front read, "If this reaches Matthew Langston, read it alone. He'll understand." He looked up, but all for girls were staring at him now, their eyes glimmering not with fear, but with something else, expectation, destiny. He clutched the envelope, his breath caught halfway up his throat, and in the silence of that glass house, something began to rise, not fear, not doubt, but the beginning of a truth long buried. The envelope felt heavier than paper. It trembled slightly in Matthew Langston's hands. Though the room was still and warm, the tea untouched on the glass table beside him. The four girls sat silently on the couch, their eyes tracking every movement with the patience of children who had learned to wait for things that never came. Their mother's handwriting, firm, slanted, unmistakably hers, stared back at him like a ghost. "If this reaches Matthew Langston, read it alone. He'll understand." He stood slowly, not saying a word, and left the room with the envelope gripped tightly in one hand. The girls didn't follow. They didn't ask questions. It was as if they knew exactly what the letter contained and what it would do to him. Matthew climbed the glass staircase and stepped into his study. A cavernous space, more art gallery than office, sleek furniture, shelves lined with unread books, awards that had long lost their meaning. He shut the door behind him, locked it. Only then did he sit. He unfolded the letter with slow, deliberate care. The first line hit like a slap to the soul. "If you're reading this, Matthew, then I'm already gone, and the world is a colder place for it." He froze, his throat closed. Her voice lived in those words. He could hear it as if she were speaking from the edge of the room. "I didn't tell you everything back then. I couldn't. You were grieving. You were breaking, and so was I. What neither of us said was that your daughter and I had something deeper. No, not what you think. Not romantic, not dramatic. Something quiet, something real. Ava told me things she never told you. She was afraid, Matt. She felt like she was dying in silence, and you were always chasing time. You loved her, yes, desperately, but you didn't see how much she needed you to just stop, to be. But I was there. I sat with her in the late hours, when the machines beeped like lullabies and the world outside didn't care. I held her hand. I listened. She talked about you constantly, how you were building a legacy, how she didn't want to be the legacy you mourned, but the daughter you remembered with joy. She made me promise something." Matthew's hands trembled harder now, his vision blurred. "She made me promise that if anything happened to her, I'd find you again someday. Not to remind you of her death, but to give you life, to bring you something unexpected, something you couldn't control or schedule or buy, something wild, something real. Years passed. I got sick. I didn't tell anyone at first, not even the girls. I didn't have time, but as I grew weaker, I remembered her promise, and I realized it wasn't mine to keep. It was theirs. So I told them, find the man who couldn't stop running, the man who forgot how to grieve without guilt, the man who once loved a daughter too much to let her go, and not enough to stop the world for her. When she was still here, I told them you would come." Matthew choked out a sound. It wasn't a cry. It was something roar, something broken open. "They are not a debt to pay, Matthew. They are not a burden to carry. They are a gift, a second chance, not to replace Ava. Nothing could, but to learn what you couldn't then. Sit with them, listen, breathe. Let go of the empire, let go of the guilt. These girls are your bridge back to the world, and maybe, just maybe, you're the bridge to theirs." There was no signature at the bottom. Just for words, scrawled beneath the final line. A whisper of a mother's final hope. "Bring them home, Matthew." He stared at the paper for a long time. The walls of his empire felt like they were closing in on him, glass and steel pressing in from all sides. All the awards, the IPO milestones, the magazine covers, none of them had weight now. None of them could hold back the tidal wave rising in his chest. Angela had carried his daughters' final wishes like sacred fire, and now, even in death, she had lit a path back to the only thing that mattered, not legacy, not wealth. Redemption. He stood shakily, letter in hand, and opened the study door. The girls were still there, curled up now, 3 asleep, 1 still, watching. Mira, the one who saw more than she ever said. She met his eyes. No questions, no fear. Just readiness, He walked slowly to the couch and crouched down in front of them. "I read it," he said softly. Mira nodded. "We know." He looked at them all. These small miracles wrapped in hand-me-downs and invisible armor. And then, without a trace of hesitation, he asked, "Would you let me be whatever you need?" For the first time, Lena, the leader, the stone wall, leaned forward. Her voice was barely audible. "We need someone who won't leave when it gets hard." Matthew nodded, tears in his eyes. "I can do that." And in that quiet, sacred moment, no fanfare, no cameras, a billionaire broke down, and a family was born. The rain had passed by morning, but the sky still wore the color of ash. The girls awoke slowly, blinking under the soft throw blankets that Matthew had laid over them sometime in the night. They hadn't moved much from the couch, for small figures, exhausted from months of running, finally still. A single beam of sunlight crept through the tall windows, cutting across the floor like a blessing. Matthew had barely slept. He'd sat in his study most of the night. Angela's letter opened beside him, his hands steepled, his eyes fixed on the horizon beyond the city skyline. Every word echoed, "Bring them home, Matthew." He'd always believed home was a place, a structure, something you could build with concrete and confidence. Now he understood. It was people. The girls shuffled into the kitchen one by one, quiet, cautious, but louder. Mira peeked into the refrigerator. June gently fed crumbs to a small sparrow, perched just outside the glass door. Lena stood at the counter, arms crossed, eyes surveying everything as usual. But it was Nina, the smallest, who looked up at Matthew and said the first surprising thing of the day. "Where's Ava's room?" He blinked. "What? You said your daughter's name was Ava. I think we should see her room." He hadn't set foot in that room in nearly 8 years. At first, he'd kept it untouched, as if preserving the space would somehow preserve the girl. Then slowly, out of pain, he closed the door and stopped speaking her name aloud. The room became a time capsule locked in grief. But now, he rose silently and led them down the hallway. The door creaked open. Inside, the room was preserved. In soft pastels and string lights, a constellation of hand-drawn stars still clung to the ceiling. Books lined the wall, fantasy, astronomy, coding. On the desk, a cracked laptop. On the dresser, a framed photo of Ava in a hospital bed, laughing with someone just out of frame. "Angela." The girl stepped in reverently. Mira ran her fingers along a shelf. Lena studied the robotics kits in the corner. Nina opened the closet, marveling at the neat rows of shoes. June spotted something small on the floor, a cake cane shaped like Saturn. "I like her," she said simply. Matthew stood in the doorway, breath catching. Then Mira turned, something glowing in her eyes. "She left something, didn't she?" He frowned. "What do you mean?" "She was smart. I could feel it. She would have left something for you, a clue, something only someone who listened would understand." Lena added, "Maybe she didn't want to be remembered. Maybe she wanted to be found." Matthew moved forward slowly, pulled open the drawer. On Ava's desk, mostly notebooks, old pens, a few birthday cards. Then, he saw it, a small envelope, yellowed with time, tucked beneath the last journal. It was addressed in Ava's messy, looping handwriting. "For Dad, when you're ready to stop running." His fingers trembled as he opened it. Inside was a flash drive and a note. "Dad, I know you're going to keep working after I'm gone. You'll bury yourself in boardrooms and silence. I don't blame you. I know that's how you survive. But I need you to do one thing. Plug this in. It's a project I never finished, because I knew it wasn't mine to finish. It's yours now. And there's love, Ava. P.S. You always said technology connects people. Prove it." Matthew closed his eyes. This wasn't grief anymore. This was a map. He raced to his office, the girls at his heels, and plugged the flash drive into the desktop. The screen blinked, then opened to a program titled Project Orion. It was a rough prototype, code, sketches, user interface notes, half-finished designs for a digital platform meant to connect runaway children, displaced families, foster siblings torn apart by the system. Ava's notes were everywhere, in digital handwriting. "Too many kids go missing and stay invisible. Mom says I see the world differently. Maybe that's my gift. What if tech wasn't about money? What if it saved someone?" Matthew scrolled through pages of code, functional, brilliant, incomplete, and then one final note. "If I had more time, I'd build it myself. But maybe one day." You'll meet the kids who need it, and then you'll build it for them. He turned slowly to the four girls standing behind him. Nina blinked. She knew we were coming. Lena's jaw clenched. It's not just us, is it? Matthew shook his head. No, he said. It's every kid who's been forgotten. This is the second chance. Mira stepped forward, hands on the desk. Then we finish it. Matthew looked at her. This child of the woman who had saved his daughter. This girl who had slept under the stars because no one else would care. You're right, he whispered. We finish it, and in that moment, something shifted in him forever. He was no longer a CEO hiding in his empire of glass. He was a father again, to more than one, and together, they were about to build something far greater than wealth. They were going to build a bridge back to the forgotten, to the broken, to the brave. The launch was quiet by design. No press conferences, no investors, no spotlight, just a single update on the Arcus's website that redirected to a new domain, projectorion.org. A simple message loaded first, for every child who was told they were too small, too poor, too broken to matter. This is your signal flare. You are seen. Within hours, messages started pouring in, from shelters, from social workers, from anonymous kids using library computers, dozens at first, then hundreds. Matthew Langston sat at the control terminal, the four girls surrounding him like satellites in a new orbit. The interface blinked with life, a heat map of missing youth, separated siblings, anonymous tips, safe house locations, data so raw and real it choked him. Mira had organized the design team. Lena insisted on vetting every piece of code. June added color and warmth to the content, and Nina, the youngest, had a knack for testing vulnerabilities. No bug escaped her tiny fingers. Ava would have adored them. But what made the project unstoppable was what came next. 3 days after launch, Matthew received an anonymous email. Subject, Angela's ledger body. There's more you need to see. Come alone. 6 p.m. Union Street. Locker 314. Attached, a single photo, a blurred image of Angela, holding Ava's hand in what appeared to be a hospital corridor. His blood turned to ice. Angela and Ava together. He didn't hesitate. The locker was tucked beneath a rundown bus terminal, wedged between crumbling columns and flickering lights. Inside, a black binder, worn and weathered, wrapped in twine. No name, no label. He opened it there on the bench, hard hammering. Inside were medical records, Ava's, but the dates didn't match. There were entries from after her death. Confused, he flipped faster. DNA test results, handwritten notes in Angela's script, photos of Ava older than he remembered, face pale but alive, sitting in what looked like a safe house, smiling with the four girls. His chest tightened. No, it couldn't be. Ava died. He saw her. He buried her, didn't he? And then the final page, Angela's journal entry. Matthew thinks Ava died in that hospital room, but she didn't. I knew the risks of the surgery, knew the doctors were giving up, so I made a choice. I called in a favor, an experimental program, underground but real. The only chance she had. It worked, but it meant disappearing completely. I faked the burial. I had to. If Ava went back to the system or press, they would have torn her apart. But here's what you need to know now. She didn't stay hidden forever. Ava didn't want to just live. She wanted to matter. She became someone new, someone brave. And she did more in 5 years than most do in a lifetime. You know her now as Lena. The world tilted. Matthew's hands trembled as the words repeated in his head like thunder. Lena, the fiercest of them, the one who kept her guard up, who had eyes too old for her age, who had Ava's intelligence, Ava's stare. He staggered to his feet. She wasn't just any girl. She was his daughter, reborn by sacrifice, saved by the woman he had once overlooked, and now standing right in front of him without ever knowing the truth. When he returned to the penthouse, the girls were crowded around the interface, working on responses to new emergency messages from kids in New Orleans and Chicago. Lena turned when he entered, her usual sternness softening slightly when she saw his face. You okay? She asked. Matthew could barely breathe. He walked to her slowly, holding the binder. She looked down at it, confused, then up at him again. I need to show you something, he said. About you, about who you really are. She flinched, but held her ground. I know who I am. I don't think you do, he said softly, but you're about to. The others gathered silently as he opened the binder, laying bare the past. Page by page, photo by photo, her hands began to shake. Mira whispered, "Wait, you mean?" June gasped. Nina clung to Lena's side, confused but sensing something seismic. Lena stepped back, tears rising to the corners of her eyes. "No, that's not." She stopped, her breath catching. "You're saying, I'm Ava." Matthew nodded. Angela single quotes as planned. The surgery, the escape, the name change. It all added up. Her migraines, her flashbacks, the music she always hummed but didn't remember learning, her fascination with stars and robotics. "I always felt like something was missing," Lena whispered. Matthew reached for her hand, his own shaking. "I buried a headstone, Lena, but I never buried you. I just didn't know you'd come back to me." Tears spilled down her cheeks, silent, bewildered. "I don't remember all of it," she said. "You don't have to," he replied. "You're still you, just more than either of us ever understood." And in that room, among four girls who had survived the world, and a father who had nearly lost himself in it, something sacred stitched itself back together. Not perfectly, but real. And that, finally, was enough. The final scene unfolded. Months later, in a packed hall filled with foster families, volunteers, and kids once lost and now found. Project Orion has spread like wildfire, funded not by Arcus, but by Lena's foundation, Ava Reborn. Matthew watched from the wings as Lena, now 15, stepped up to the microphone, confident, strong, a leader not by blood, but by choice. "My name is Lena," she said, "but I was once Ava Langston. I was once forgotten. Now I remember. And now I help others be found." Thunderous applause. But she didn't flinch. Behind her, her three sisters stood proud. In the front row, Matthew Langston wept, because he hadn't just found his daughter. He had found his reason to live.